Right, so without further ado, I shall hand over to Justin and Arie.
Morning all. Any of you here last year? Excellent. At least somebody was. This is kind of a part two. Last year I talked about in-ear monitors from an artist's point of view and how you interface with your artist. This is available, last year's is available on our website if you want to have a look at that. This year I'm going to talk much more, well, this is about the kit really, what you need as a touring engineer to make stuff happen, rather than the artists. Now, mostly kit is obviously determined by budget. A decent set of Ultimate Ears or Sensophonics will cost you anywhere between £500 and £1,500. And they do break, they'll be, you're required to replace them quite often. And if you're going to do it properly, you need to have spares for everybody. So if you're talking a reasonably large band, and particularly if you're doing mixes for crew as well, which is increasingly the case, then you're talking tens of thousands of pounds just in the investment in the moulds and the cables, the transmitters. Excuse me. The transmitters, the belt packs, and all of the other kit. Again, you can spend a huge amount of money. These days, most of the people that I see touring tend to use either Shure or Sennheiser. The advantage of the Shure kit is the fact that on their PSM 900 belt packs, you can actually scroll around all of the mixes if you have programmed the belt pack correctly, so you can listen to other people's mixes. But yeah, it's an expensive business. There are all sorts of lovely bits of kit, supplementary, of course, to the consoles. And these days, as I'm sure you're all aware, there's lots of lovely console in the marketplace. And again, depending on how much money you've got, they are, many of them have got very specific parts of the processing which are dedicated towards ears. I would talk about the DigiDesign stuff, for example. The old Avid system has got a system called PQ, Personal Q, which is its own self-drive in-ear monitor system, whereby each musician gets a little dedicated console that they can mix stems from the monitor console. Rather than you giving them dedicated mixes, they can mix themselves. All of this is very luxurious if you can afford it. There's 2 or 3 bits of kit that are really quite new and very interesting. There's a thing called a Klang, which is probably the best of what we call the Spatial mixers. And what this allows you to do is to take a whole bunch of audio inputs and drag and drop them into a pictorial, into a graphic simulation of the stereo image. One of the questions that I was asked recently by an artist is it possible when I turn around, if you imagine a situation where you have a singer, where you have made the stage sound like the stage in the singer's ears. So, for example, you have the keyboard player over here, the guitars over here, the brass section there, the backing singers there, all spatially orientated in the ears so they can hear the picture, audio picture, like the band are laid out behind them. What happens if you turn around? It's all backwards. This is a fairly difficult problem to solve quickly and easily. The Klang, however, does this for you automatically. It's got a little tracker on it that detects the orientation of the person wearing the ear system to the transmitter, and keeps the spatial orientation no matter no matter where your head is. It's a very interesting piece of kit, actually. There's their website's really good. If you want to have a look at it, there's some quite interesting stuff there. So it's a very difficult situation to deal with. The smaller shows, particularly if you're working with an artist who is trying to build themselves a profile by playing a whole different series of gigs in clubs, theatres, festivals. The festival monitor man, or the in-house monitor man generally in clubs and theatres, you never know what you're going to get. Some of them are great, some of them not so. In order to get the best performance out of the band, obviously they have to be comfortable. Excuse me. So today I'd want to talk about the best way that I have yet seen of getting a good, consistent result for a small band without spending too much money and being in total control of all of it yourself. The criteria that I have really is that it all needs to go, it all needs to be able to fly. So it all needs to go into 1 or 2 pally cases, none of which can weigh more than 30 kilos. Otherwise, you're going to start paying large amounts of money in excess baggage. And most European airlines these days, it's something like 15 or 20 euros a kilo, which can cost you tens of thousands over the course of a summer. So recently, I have a little house gig in London, the Courtyard Theatre. It's a small venue, 200 capacity, little room. We have lots of fun in there. And recently, my colleague Arie here came to visit us in the Courtyard. And he bought his own entirely self-contained audio system. Basically, all I did was just a left and right, wasn't it, actually? You did it all yourself at the Courtyard.
Yeah, you fed me a left and right from your console to mix the support act.
That's right, yeah, indeed. So, and yeah, I was really impressed with Arie's system. He mixed the show on 2 iPads, one for the stage, one for front of house. So I've invited him along today to talk us through his kit. And yeah, this is the kind of kit that is really orientated towards small bands, splitter vans, light, easy, quick. The whole thing was very impressive. So, yeah, I'd like to introduce Arie to you. And let's first talk about the console, Arie. What console do you use?
I've got 2 different rigs. I use, for both of the Behringer X32s, but I use the X32 cores, the single rack unit ones. 2 of those, and my other rig is just an X32 rack.
So the X32 core is just a mixer with no input-output, is that correct?
Yeah, it has a local headphone out, but it doesn't have any local inputs. You have to feed that via Cat5 from the AES50 output on the stage box. Okay,
so in the rack, you've got a picture of it, have you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So one of the acts I tour with is an act called Odyssey in Good Company. They employed me as a front of house engineer on a run of about 120 shows last year. By kind of show 20, as I got to know them, because it's a 6-piece band. They do live hip hop. Everybody sings, and they're all quite particular about their monitor mixes. So after 20 or so shows, having to set that up every time, it was taking a lot of time, and especially if we were late to a show because we had to do an extra stop for gas, etc. We would push all the way to doors, and it would just be a bit stressful. So I wanted to kind of build a rig that could travel in the splitter van, also fly with us wherever we were going, but also not have to pay any excess baggage, something that I could do all the monitor mixes on very quickly. Because another issue, as Justin was saying, is that when you go to a club or a theater or even a festival, you just can't trust whoever's on the monitor board. And we had some really terrible experiences. But yeah, just lightweight, flexible, and be able to fly. So this is the rig I built for Odyssey and Good Company. It all packs down into one rack unit actually when it flies, but can kind of run you through it. See at the top here, you've got an X32 core for front of house, and at the bottom, an X32 core for monitors. There's a Waves impact server that I run from a XWSG card on the front of house system. And then there's the S32 stage box from Behringer as well. Show you some more pictures. Close up of the SoundGrid server.
So the server is actually not an essential part of the rig, but it's you just run Waves plugins on it, right?
Yeah, that kind of came later in the game. I did probably the first 80 or so shows without it, and then because I was doing so many shows, I just wanted to be able to play a little bit more, so I got the Wave system. And the Wave system cost way more than this entire rig. Like we put together this rig for, including the rack, about $2,000 US.
Yeah, so it was extremely good value for money.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Yeah, and I'll just show a picture of that's the back with the XWSG card, and I also use the USB card on the monitor console to record every show that we do, to multi-track it. And then there's just a single router. That was the last show, so it came loose, but it was cable tied to the lid of the rack. So as soon as you open the lid, you just put the lid on top of it, and it's all ready to go.
Excellent. And so as far as the monitor mixers are concerned, you use ears and wedges.
Yeah.
You can do either or.
We started out, none of the band was on ears when I first got on the tour. And now, after like the 150th show, 5 members are on ears and 1 member is still on wedges. So the lead singer, just because he likes it and he's not used to wedges yet. He's not used to in-ears yet.
Sure. And do you use radio kit at all?
No. We just travel with 5 wired belt packs.
Okay.
From Behringer as well.
Sure, there's lots of good stuff out there. Those tiny little Fisher ones the size of a matchbox. I've used those with great results, actually.
Yeah.
And I've actually done the cheat as well of running a stereo mix down one cable. With one balanced cable, you do left and right on hot and cold, and you can get away with your musician only having to trail one cable instead of a pair of them. But yeah, I agree with you entirely. Why use radio unless you absolutely have to?
Yeah.
You know, it's the number of shows I see where people use radio mics and they never take them out of the stand. And you think, well, why don't you just use a wire? Because the best radio in the world isn't as good as a decent balanced mic cable, for my money.
Yeah.
And there's, of course, the licensing issues as well, which you have to be very careful of in Europe these days.
And lots of festivals and even some of the bigger clubs will already have their own radio kit available. So you can just patch into theirs as well.
Well, this is what a lot of people do these days in order to avoid the licensing issues, is that they know that certainly most festivals, any decent festival, main stage or second stage, are going to have a rack of ears and a rack of handheld stuff. Okay, let's talk about some of the other advantages of it. You mix front of house with an iPad. Mm-hmm. Do you use a backup at all in case your radio drops out? Or
yeah, I've probably done between 200 and 300 shows now with like variations of this type of setup, and I've only had one problem on one show, and that's because one of the techs kicked out my power. So the whole rig went down for about 30 seconds. So I've really not had any issues with connectivity, but I do carry 3 iPads with me. I use 2 on every show. Depending upon the setup, I might use 2 for front of house, like 1 for just DCAs and the other one for channel banks. Or I might use 1 for front of house and 1 for monitors. So yeah, and then I just carry a third Amazon Kindle Fire as a backup, which works incredibly, and it's only like 49 quid. But you can get them on sale as well when they do sales for like 40 quid.
That's ridiculous.
Really yeah. I might have a picture of the iPads.
Yeah, this is something I was going to, another question I was going to ask you actually, about, because I'm an old analog guy, you know. I don't like being more than 2 button pushes or clicks away from any parameter that I want to get my hands on in a show, because particularly if you're working with an artist like your hip hop guys or anybody who's got any kind of improv in the show, you really need to be able to react quickly. And the thing that scares me about the iPad is that it's like trying to paint your living room through the letterbox. Do you know what I mean? It's I suppose if you have 2 of them, then you can do DCAs on one and channel faders on the other.
Yeah. It's definitely not ideal, like in terms of if we had unlimited budget. I mean, I might still do the iPad thing, but I might choose something a bit bigger and more tactile. Mm-hmm. But there's just so many advantages of just traveling as a one-man show, like being able to be on stage and have a quiet chat with everybody while you're mixing the monitors is fantastic. And I can't really, like, every time I'm using a house system, that's what I miss the most, is just being able to be on stage right next to the lead singer, listen to his mix and go, oh yeah, I know exactly what you need, just that, and that. He's like, yeah, that sounds amazing. Rather than from front of house trying to like solo up his mix or something in your cans and just kind of guessing what frequencies are weird and trying to guess how the wedges sound.
Well, that is, of course, the big advantage, isn't it? Yeah, is that you can actually stand right by your singer with the control surface in your hand.
Yeah.
And actually, I've encountered a number of people who give access to the band via iPhones or various other. I believe you can buy apps for most Androids as well now, whereby you can have limited access to your own monitor mix. Mm-hmm. So actually, artists can mix their own monitors with an iPhone, which talks to the monitor system.
Yeah, we've started doing that as well once the band moved to in-ears. And I think I have a picture of the routing of the rig here. So what I'm doing at the moment is this stuff lives on stage in a small rack. So it's just a stage box and a router. And that router is connected to everyone's iPhones. So I'm on stage with them before the show and I just make sure they're all getting connected. And they're not having any issues there. So when I advance the show, I always request that there's 2 Cat5 runs from front of house to stage. One is for the run between the monitor console and the stage rack. And one is for a network run from the front of house router to the stage router. So it basically repeats whatever the front of house router is doing. So that means that I've got a router at front of house where I can connect to. So even if I'm 100 meters away from the stage, it's all fine. And there's a router on stage where the band can connect to and mix their in-ears or fine-tune the stuff that they need, depending on how long we have for sound check. But yeah, so there's a Cat5 run here that goes to the monitor console and that goes straight to the front of house console. There's a Cat6 run that goes to the Impact server, and that also splits off and goes to my laptop for running the Waves multi-grid package, and a network cable that goes from the monitor rig to the front of house rig to the front of house router, and also a USB cable that goes from the monitor rig to the laptop.
So if you have issues with the iPad, you can mix a show on the laptop.
Yeah, you could as well. I've never had issues with the iPad though, so I've never had to do that, but you could do that as well. But like there are a few limitations, and one of them is like scene management, and it's not very good on the X32 cores. But it's really easy to use the laptop to be able to save and edit your scenes or your show files. So it's good to have a laptop in the rig as well.
Okay, so you use the laptop as a supplementary tool to the iPads rather than a backup.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so when you store the show files, do you do a multiple system, or do you do show files for different situations, for clubs, theatres, outdoors, that kind of thing?
Yep. I just have my go-to, like small, like probably very small, medium, and large and open air show files. And also the great thing about the size of this rig is if you record every show every night, just when you travel in the splitter the next day, you can just chuck it on your lap, and it's not very heavy. It's it's about 20 something kgs in total, like 24, 25 kgs, and just play back last night's show and just pop on some headphones and just start mixing. So you don't have to be too bored on the 8-hour drives.
So you've mixed a show already by the time you get to the gig.
Yeah, and it's great when you work with a new band. Like I just went on tour with Ghost Poet, and that happened. I'm just doing front of house for them, but so I never worked with them before. And I did the first show, and I was like, wow, okay, this is not what I expected. That's crazy. But I recorded the whole show. So the next day in the bus, I just chucked up the show file, made sure I found all the weird bits that were going on, corrected them, and then day 2 sounded great.
Yeah, well, that's a very new take on the idea of the virtual sound check, really, and it's actually a much more practical application for it. Because I've never found it in big shows. I've never found it particularly useful. Yeah, as a front of house guy, if you want to tweak your effects cues, that kind of thing, you want to mess about with reverbs, it's really handy. But actually, sonically, it's really no use because you haven't got a band on stage making noise. So what's actually coming down the microphones is a different thing entirely. And of course, that's very room dependent. But you're using it for an entirely different purpose here, and I kind of like the idea of being able to do it in the van. You know, I guess if you've got back-to-back shows, it means that you have the time enough to work on them that you never have in a live show situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And even a rehearsal situation, like I can spend as long as I want, like on a 60-day tour or something. I could spend every day tweaking those show files. You know, I think there reaches a point where you start to make it worse. But
well, you know, it's
a great option.
Yeah, it's like so many things, isn't it? A colleague of mine once said to me, as I've always remembered it, the most important thing about EQing is knowing when to stop. Because you can just keep going, particularly if you've got the time. And, you know, I'm afraid I've caught myself on a few occasions spending half a song EQing the hi-hat, you know, which is really not what you should be doing. Do you have reliability issues with any of this kit? I mean, you know, most people in the pro audio industry tend to shy away from the B word.
No, yeah, it's funny. I hear that at every club I go to. You know, why would you choose this to tour almost? But actually, it's just the way you use it. I think it's a really great sounding console, but it really helps having two because you can dedicate one just to front of house. And it's got so many great processing possibilities. And even if I didn't have the Waves package, I'd be super happy. Like some of those plugins that you can use in the effects rack are awesome. The Poltec EQ, it's got like a multi-band compressor, it's great. Transient shapers, all types of reverbs. And also just using your buses instead of, if you had to swap it with some front of house things and some monitor mixes, just to be able to use them all for pretty much parallel compression of different varieties. So I can have like one splashy parallel compression, one punchy parallel compression. And all that makes it a really good sounding console. So I've had multiple occasions where people have been really surprised at the sound of that and not believed it was a Behringer X32.
Well, I was, to be honest with you. And, you know, I mean, my own experience of the X32s has been the consoles themselves. And I have to say that I find it a fairly unpleasant experience to mix on, but I'm lucky because I'm used to mixing on rather larger and more expensive consoles. But I guess if you've got no surface at all, and you've got decent preamps. And you were saying earlier about the fact that actually you can still do a show. I mean, the bus thing, the bus is interesting because you use all 16 outputs of the monitor console, but you use the 16 buses of the front of house console are thus freed up so as you can do all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you were saying that if one of them breaks, you have a way that you can do the whole show on one.
Yeah, I've got a show file as well that's just front of house and monitors. So if one went down during a show, I can just load that up and get back to work, which is cool. So it's kind of like, not really, but it's kind of like having a redundant setup on tour, which if you're touring with another console, it's like mega expensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's quite cool.
Absolutely. And of course, if one of them does break, then what was it? Amazon Prime delivery the next day for 900 quid or something?
Yeah, well, I think they're only about 500 quid.
Really?
Yeah, for each of them. So I've always got in the back of my mind, like if I'm touring another country, you can just pop down the Guitar Center and just pick one up, It's pretty cool. Like if one just goes for some reason, some power supply breaks or something, just pick up another one, put it in the rack, load up the show files again, you're off. Could do it in 20 minutes.
So essentially, it's all almost disposable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's really,
in terms of the reliability issues, if any bit of it breaks, any part of it is easily replaceable. You don't have to be phoning a PA company in another country up going, please send us something.
Yeah, and I like that. And I think it's cool because you can also upgrade the system quite easily. Like I've had the chance to try like a Midas DL32 stage box, and there is something a bit more pleasant about the sound. I think it's worth the upgrade price. But it's cool how you could just build a rig like this for 2,000 American dollars just for a run of shows. And then just say like, okay, that was really fun. Let me just upgrade the preamps because I can now because I have a bit more money from that tour. And just
I should have done that a year ago when it was only about 1,500 quid, but the pound's taken a battering there. So, damn. Okay, there's a few more questions that I'd like to ask about that actually. Mostly the people that I've seen doing this in the past have got this as a monitor system and they take a passive split of the inputs, usually on an XLR panel on the back of the rack to get into the house system so as you can use the existing house, front of house console and effects. Do you do this? Have you got passive splits in your kit?
No, not that we travel with.
I guess it's more weight, of course, but because you can't make a passive split without a whole bunch of XLR sockets and cables and a panel, I guess.
And just because this whole rig's, like 26 kgs or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I imagine a split would be 20 kgs on its own.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be able to fly cheaply with that.
Yeah, I guess it would. But I guess you could always split it off before, use the house split.
Yeah.
Just use monitor tails to go into your.
With the bands I'm working with, I've never been in a situation with this rig where we've had to do a split for broadcast or anything like that. But I imagine what we do is just get Backline to provide us with a splitter because the cost of just traveling with that splitter for a few shows would far outweigh the cost of just renting it for a few shows.
Yeah.
And I don't have to worry about the maintenance or anything.
Of course.
If it breaks, I can yell at somebody else.
Most decent-sized festivals where you're likely to have live-to-air broadcast are going to have all of that kit on stage anyway. Certainly the festivals that I've done for PA companies, this is one of the things that we're told we need to be able to provide break-ins and breakouts at any point in the from the stage to the front of house snake. Mm-hmm. So interesting. So do you carry microphones? Do you carry all your own stage cabling, or do you just use local XLR and mic stands?
It depends upon the type of run we're doing. So if it's like a lot of one-offs, I'll just carry vocal mics just to make sure the singers they have their own mic and they're not sharing spit with anybody else. But if we have a bit more space and if we're like in one country for a run of 40 or 50 shows, I will just carry the DI boxes that we need, mostly so I can just start placing them on the stage before anybody set anything up and kind of set the tone for the local crew that things are going to move really fast. And then I'll just carry vocal mics and maybe some overheads as well, because I quite like large diaphragm overheads, and not every club has that.
Yeah, it's mostly there's no shortage of 57s and 58s, but yeah, it's always the condensers, the more expensive microphones.
Yeah, but most places that I go have great mic kits, so it's almost a shame not to use them. I don't think I need to carry more mics, and if I have to swap like a Beta 52 for a D6 one night, I don't really care because my show file's set already. All I have to do is tweak a bit on the kick drum, and everything else was pretty similar.
So it's just a case of a quick bit of gain and EQ adjustment.
Exactly,
and
again, it far outweighs the cost of traveling with my own mic kit all the time, which is just cost. It's just like actual expense of having to carry a rig with more weight.
Yeah, well, that's the crucial thing, isn't it? Yeah, as I said, I've worked with artists who've paid tens of thousands of euros over a summer in excess baggage. And, that's just backline, that's just guitars, snare drum, and, samplers and all that kind of stuff. Interesting. Do you find any latency issues?
There's none. The X32 is really low latency. I think it's like 0.8 milliseconds from input to output. So there's no issues with the in-ears. I think the Waves package can add another 0.8 milliseconds or so. And of course, if you start to add plugins, it adds a little bit of latency there. But I don't use that for monitors. I just use it for front of house. So the monitors always are very low latency.
So I guess actually on paper, this is really quite a high-spec rig for very little money.
Yeah, I think it is. And the consoles are really great once you get to know them. Like you can do a lot of stuff in there that you can't do on other consoles. I think it has a really punchy sound, which I like.
Interesting. I haven't really mixed very much on the X32s. As I say, I try and avoid them really, but I guess this is a kind of a different application. Do you think there is a difference in the sound between the consoles and the stage boxes?
Yeah, I mean, I can't see there being any physical difference in the components, but I get along much better with the rack and the core than I do with the full console. If I mix a show on the full console, there's something going on that I just don't feel it sounds as good. I don't know if that's just me or if it's something in the internal workings of the consoles, but I do prefer the sound of the cores and racks.
Well, there's certainly some interesting psychology going on there. Yeah, it's a very interesting system. It really is. Are there any particular down points that we were talking earlier on about the fact that it's hard to dep?
That is one, yeah. If you have to dep a show out, it's probably better off to just use the house rig. That's what I found out. And just tell the band that they're going to spend another hour and a half than usual sound checking, because we'll get through sound checking about like from the start of load in to the finish of sound check, 45 minutes with a 6-piece band, which I think is really good. And on a house rig, it'll take an hour and a half, if not 2, depending upon the local crew, depending upon any problems they have with their setup. So yeah, another downfall is that like it wouldn't be a good application for a house rig. You have to get a bit creative with the console in terms of the routing inside, because there are limitations. Obviously, it's such an inexpensive console. They haven't put all of the new toys that you would find on a S21 or something in there. So you kind of have to learn its quirks and then work with them. So it would be horrible on like a festival, or if multiple bands were using it.
Oh yeah, yes. I'm sure that this is a bespoke deal.
Absolutely.
We were talking earlier about the possibility of using this in much larger format shows, big festivals, for example. Do you anticipate there being any issues if your front of house position is, 65, 70 meters from the stage?
Well, this is the new version of the rig, which has the router on stage, and that was the missing link for me. Is how am I? In a big festival, I don't want to take all the responsibility for the monitors, because if something goes wrong on stage, I'm never going to get there.
Yeah, of course not.
So I need to hand that responsibility off to the house monitor engineer at the festival. But we just had so many bad experiences that I just had to put my thinking cap on and think, what could we do? So moved the guys to in-ears, which was the start, to get them more used to in-ears, and then got them on the iPhone app and clubs and get them used to using that. And now for the summer festival run, we'll be doing some big festivals with this, but there'll be a router on stage with them so that they can all connect to the system and mix their own in-ears.
Right, so essentially you just give the house monitor guy the monitor iPad and say, look after them.
I don't think I'd even trust him to do that.
Oh, really?
No, I think, because I'll have access, I'll have a front of house and a monitor iPad here as well. And it's not the most elegant system in the world, but I can monitor all the headphone mixes here and the front house here. So I just plug and punch. So I'll just be checking on the guys' headphone mixes as soon as I got the front house sorted.
Do you have a system whereby the artist can talk to you?
Yeah, as they've all got vocal mics. So I'll just, if I can see that they're having a problem, I'll just mute the front of house and just listen to the monitors and solo them up.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a talkback. The X32 cores, they have one talkback input each on the back. So I just plug a talkback mic into the monitor rig and just put that onto one of these buttons, which is great, and then just talk to the band.
Right. So, I've had done monitors in the past for a couple of artists who've had Q mics all over the stage. And actually, there's a company called Radial who make DI boxes, and they make actually lots of really clever kit. One of the things they make is a microphone splitter that has got a momentary foot switch on it.
That's cool.
So what you can do is you can take two cables from, for example, the singer's microphone, one of which goes to the stage box, the other of which goes to a little shout speaker or directly to the monitor engineer's in-ears. And if the singer wants to talk to you, all he does is push the foot switch, and it switches the signal from going to the stage box to going to the queue.
That's great.
I actually worked for a band who'd got 4 of these on stage and 2 switch mics, one each side of the stage for the 2 guitar techs. So any of the band or the 2 techs could talk to me in my ears without me having to solo anything.
That's a great idea, and I'm going to build that into the rig for the festival.
Well,
I like that a lot.
The problem is, the way that I see it, is how do you actually, if you're mixing front of house, how do you hear them if you've not got headphones on?
I do have headphones, but not all the time. Yeah, it's a good question. Maybe I have to invent some sort of sign.
You could probably actually get away with using something really small and local, like a Q box. Do you know what I mean? There's some kind of little box with an amplifier in it, a battery-powered amplifier. Yeah. And a little speaker.
Actually, it's a great idea.
Clipped onto the iPad there.
Yeah. Actually, it's a great idea. Yeah, because I do have 2 local outputs on those consoles as well, so I could use that for the shout box.
Could you actually make the local output onto the? Could you make the headphone jack on the iPad?
I've been toying with the idea. Somebody put it in my head just for fun, that I should get one of those. Like an American baseball games when they sell peanuts, and I've got that kind of tray. But I should get and put my 2 iPads on there and a little wireless receiver and just kind of obnoxiously walk around the crowd saying, "Excuse me."
Sell ice creams.
Yeah, maybe I could make a bit of money on the side.
Fantastic.
But yeah, there is a humorous side to touring with this kind of rig as well, and I love it because it cracks me up every time, and it cracks up like all the house crew and stuff.
Well,
so you end up a lot with situations like these at festivals or at big clubs where you just dunk your iPads on top of the house console for a stand. And I quite enjoy doing that.
And just using the house console for the playback, walk in and walk out music.
Yeah, depending upon the act. So.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
A £30,000 stand. Excellent, good stuff. Well, yeah, I suppose, many people, I mean, I have to say, when you walked into the Courtyard Theatre, I thought, really? But I have to say that I was very impressed, not only with the small size of the thing, because it's not a big room, but it doesn't take up much room on stage. I mean, even in a little tiny club, you could get away with doing a very high-spec show.
Absolutely.
And, once I'd got over the kind of comedy factor, I realised it was the way forward, actually. Particularly for me, I think the thing that is the most liberating is that you have a dedicated split that you don't have to do. You don't have to do a channel share for monitors in front of house. And, which is one of the problems that I have with house rigs, is that if I show up, even with a show file, it is possible on most small format consoles, even certainly the little Soundcrafts, the little Midases, even the Yamahas, the M7 and the CL series, it's possible to double patch all of your inputs if you've got less than 32 inputs. I think most of the consoles can accommodate 64 faders, but even if you've only got a 32 pair input stage box, you can double patch. So essentially, you have one layer of inputs for front of house and one layer of inputs for monitors. It's the only way of achieving a result like this out of one console situation. You share the gain, but that's the only thing that you share. And actually, you can use the trim, the digital trim, if you want to change the levels between the layers. But it takes ages to build that. And of course, you are trying to operate 2 consoles within one surface. So it's doubling the potential of you being able to make confusing mistakes, change things in the monitors which you didn't mean to, or change things in the house which you didn't mean to. You've got to really pay attention which layer you're on and how your routing works. If you just leave one channel accidentally still routed to front of house in the monitor layer, you can be in a world of trouble and not know where the problem is. I have done this. It was one of those, where the hell's that coming from situations. Very tricky. Very tricky. We have, ladies and gentlemen, 5 minutes left of our allotted time. Has anybody got any questions that you'd like to ask either of us? Any points that you'd like to raise for discussion? Darren will come to you with a microphone in just a second, kind sir.
Right, so who's that? There we go.
Cheers. Hi, I was just wondering with your setups and your monitor sends, do you ever do them with bands where you have separate monitor setups for different songs?
Yes. Not necessarily monitor setups, but certainly different monitor mixes for different tunes. And again, this is one of the great advantages, in my personal opinion, one of the very few major advantages of the digital console over the analog console is that you can do snapshots.
Yeah.
and snapshots can include routing. Again, this varies between the different platforms. For example, the Yamaha consoles, there's a pick-off, but you can't actually change the patch. The patch doesn't follow the snapshots, whereas on a Midas, it does.
Right.
So you can't. It depends how radical a change you're talking about,
Yeah.
really.
Because I know, like on say on like a Pro 2, you can have all those snapshots and you can just hit go and go and go and in each song.
Yeah, of course. This, I've got a Pro 1 in my little courtyard theatre.
Yeah.
Now, of course, as a houseboard, I never use the snapshots because I've never had the opportunity to rehearse with the acts that are coming in. In order for you to build a show with any sensible use of snapshots in it, you have to have done considerable amount of rehearsal with the band, and you have to know the tunes. If this is the case, then unless you tour your own console, then you need to build yourself show files with the snapshots in them for 4 different kinds of console, really, for at least for the Yamaha, the Midas, the Soundcraft, at least to the common, and the, I guess the Behringer thing too, but...
Yeah, the X82 does do snapshots, but with the bands I'm working with, we do so many shows I don't really use them because I've got my monitor iPad and everything's post-fader, and I just kind of ride things depending on the songs because I know what they want. And
so have you done anything like that, or does your monitor mixes usually kind of stay the same?
They're staying the same. One, because I've never had the opportunity to have, like a week of pre-production or anything with the bands. Like I'm flying in and just going to tour on the first day.
Yeah.
So for me, that works. But I think it would be possible to do it on these consoles. I just haven't had the time to experiment with it. Yeah,
I think it's possible to do it. I don't think it's as... I just don't think it's as quick. It seems a bit clunky. Loading scenes on the X32 compared to other consoles.
Sure, there's a whole bunch of clunky things about the console for sure. It's not perfect, but it's just the price to performance ratio.
Yeah,
just dealing with all the quirks. But yeah, if you had a bigger budget, you might want to look at something with a bit more flexibility. But you never know; it might work really well. I'm not really sure because they also have the Android app as well for it, and it's a lot more customizable. So you can get the features that are even hard to reach on the X32.
Is there a choice in the marketplace? I suppose you get M32 instead of X32.
It's exactly the same. Yeah, the only difference is the pre's. The processing is exactly the same.
Yeah, of course.
No, I don't think it's a lot better than the Soundcraft offerings. The lower end Soundcraft offerings. I'm not a fan of those as much as the Behringer one. But I'm quite excited for the next generation of this stuff to come out because it's not perfect right now, but just getting the workflow sorted and introducing bands to this kind of setup, I think is really dope. And when manufacturers, I mean, they're already catching on to this kind of stuff, but when they really start thinking about it, like how can you have the full large format workflow in iPads? I think it's going to be really exciting, not just for the technology, but also like the graphical interfaces that people will come out for these things. So.
Cool. Well, I guess if people are going to start writing firmware for more versatile tablet-style PCs, you can expand the iPad thing into...
That's actually one thing I didn't mention about this is all the software is open source that Behringer released. Right. So you can feasibly just, if you had the skills, just make whatever you want and it'll work with the console.
Cool. Cheers, guys.